Today, if I handed you $100, you probably wouldn't think twice. Maybe you'd spend it on groceries, fill up your gas tank, take your family out for dinner, and by next week, it would probably be gone. But what if I told you there was a time in America when $100 wasn't just useful, it was life-changing in 1910. That single amount of money could represent months of hard work for an ordinary American. It could put food on the table for weeks, pay the rent, buy furniture, or even help someone start a completely new life. For millions of families, holding $100 in cash was something they might never experience. So, what made this ordinary-looking amount of money so incredibly valuable? Were Americans actually richer back then? Or is history hiding a much more complicated story? Today, we're traveling back to 1910 America to discover what $100 could really buy in America and why its value might completely change the way you think about money. Before we start comparing prices, you need to forget everything you know about modern America. No smartphones, no internet, no supermarkets, no online banking, no credit cards. Most roads weren't even paved. Cars existed, but most Americans still relied on horses, wagons, or trains. Life moved slower. But it was also much harder. Back then, every dollar had a purpose. Every purchase had to be carefully planned because earning money wasn't easy. A factory worker often earned around $10 to $15 a week. Many farm workers earned even less, working 6 days a week. 10 hours a day was completely normal, so imagine finally saving $100 for many families. That wasn't just money. It represented months of sacrifice, months without unnecessary spending, months of saying, we can't afford it. But here's the interesting part. Simply comparing old prices with today's prices doesn't tell the whole story, because what really matters is purchasing power, how much your money can actually buy. And in 1910, $100 had extraordinary purchasing power. Let's start with the most important expense, food. Today, $100 might buy enough groceries for a week, maybe less. But in 1910, the same amount could keep a family fed for a very long time. A loaf of bread cost only a few cents. Milk was inexpensive. Eggs, potatoes, flour, sugar, and fresh vegetables were all affordable by the standards of the day. Most families didn't eat at restaurants. In fact, many towns didn't even have restaurants like we know today. People cooked almost every meal at home. Fresh produce often came directly from local farms. Some families even grew their own vegetables, raised chickens, or kept a milk cow. Nothing was wasted. Leftovers became tomorrow's lunch. And because food consumed such a large part of every family's budget, having $100 in savings provided real security. But food wasn't the only thing that cost less. Housing tells an even more incredible story. Today, $100 wouldn't even cover a single night in many hotels. But in 1910, monthly rent for a modest home could cost only a fraction of that amount depending on where you lived. Outside the biggest cities, rent was surprisingly affordable. Many immigrant families shared homes to reduce costs even further. Buying a house was still difficult, but compared with modern prices, real estate almost seems unbelievable. Of course, there's one detail people often forget. Homes were much smaller. Most didn't have air conditioning. Many had no indoor plumbing. Electricity was still spreading across the country. Daily life demanded constant physical work. Even simple household chores took hours. So while prices sound unbelievably cheap today, comfort certainly wasn't. Then came clothing. Unlike today, people didn't buy new outfits every season. A good suit might be worn for years. Shoes were repaired instead of replaced. Children often wore hand-me-down clothes from older brothers and sisters. Buying quality clothing wasn't cheap, which made every purchase important. People owned fewer things, but they usually took much better care of them. Money wasn't spent for convenience. It was spent only when absolutely necessary. And that's exactly why $100 felt like a small fortune. But here's where things become even more surprising. What if you wanted to buy transportation, or even own one of America's newest inventions, the automobile? That's where the story takes an unexpected turn. What could $100 buy in America in 1910? By 1910, America was changing faster than ever before. Factories were expanding, cities were growing, and a revolutionary invention was beginning to replace the horse, the automobile, but owning one was still a dream for most Americans. The famous Ford Model T cost around $850 when it was first introduced. That means $100 wasn't enough to buy a car, but it was enough to cover a significant portion of its price. For many families, saving that much money still took months, sometimes even years, so until they could afford a car, the horse remained king. A good horse could cost anywhere from $50 to over $150, depending on its age, health, and training. Think about that. $100 could actually buy the transportation that millions of Americans depended on every single day. Now imagine owning something even more valuable. Land. Today, buying land often requires hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. But in 1910, land in many rural parts of America was dramatically cheaper than it is today. Outside rapidly growing cities, farmland could often be purchased for only a few dollars per acre. Of course, that didn't mean everyone could afford it, because cheap prices don't matter if your income is even smaller. Many farmers rented land instead of owning it. Others borrowed money they struggled to repay. Life wasn't easy, and neither was becoming wealthy. Now let's talk about something that has represented wealth for thousands of years. Gold. Today, gold is one of the world's safest investments. Its price rises and falls, but people continue buying it during uncertain times. Back in 1910, things were different. The United States was on the gold standard. Gold wasn't freely priced like it is today. Its value was officially fixed at about $20.67 per troy ounce. That means $100 could buy almost 5 ounces of gold. Today, buying that same amount of gold would cost many thousands of dollars. It's one of the clearest examples of how dramatically the purchasing power of money has changed over the last century. But here's the question. If everything was so much cheaper, were people actually better off? Not necessarily. Medical care was limited. There were no antibiotics, no unemployment benefits, no Social Security, no Medicare. If someone lost their job, the family's income could disappear overnight. A serious illness could destroy years of savings. Children often started working at a young age to help support their families. Long working hours, dangerous factories, and physically exhausting jobs were simply part of everyday life. So while $100 carried enormous value, earning those $100 was incredibly difficult. That's the part history often forgets. People didn't become wealthy because things were cheap. They survived because they learned to spend carefully, to repair instead of replace, to save instead of borrow, to make every dollar count. And maybe that's the biggest lesson hidden inside this story. Money itself hasn't become weaker. Our economy has simply changed. Prices increased, wages increased, technology transformed the world, and lifestyles became more expensive. But one thing hasn't changed. The true value of money has never been determined by the number printed on the bill. It's determined by what that money can actually do for your life. More than a century ago, $100 represented security, opportunity, and hope. Today, it may not carry the same purchasing power, but it still reminds us of one simple truth. The value of money is always measured by the life it allows people to build. If you enjoyed traveling back in time to discover how Americans really lived over a century ago, make sure to subscribe.